So I'm going to pick up the discussion that I was having yesterday about Facebook and this question of to what extent is Facebook an addiction, and to what extent are people going to Facebook because they have some kind of need for community or connection, and they're using Facebook to try to achieve that. Okay. I appreciate all the comments that people had, and there were so many interesting comments, and people wanted me to say some more things. And I really do agree that, from my own perspective, and people can, take whatever they want from it, but I don't find Facebook to be a very meaningful medium at all. And I would say one of the best resources there is Ronald David Lang. His book, Self and Others, is very good at bringing out this difference between confirmation and disconfirmation. See, I think he would say that we get confirmation from others from either a direct response to something that we throw out to them, or from even a direct rejection, as long as it's in line with what we proposed or what we try to evoke a response from. And, it's kind of like we experience a kind of disconfirmation when you experience these tangential responses. See, I mean, that's what he would call it. Yeah, tangential response is one that's sort of like at a glancing tangent. It doesn't really address it. And one of the most classic examples is sort of a drop off from conversation. So, if I say, hey, I really enjoyed that movie last night, usually you want a person to say, yeah, me too, or I didn't, or why would you like that, or whatever. And even if they're confrontational, it's still confirming in that they regarded my statement as relevant, and they tried to respond to it as they imagined it was, for me. It's very different than a tangential response. Whereas if I say, I really enjoyed that movie, and then either the person says nothing, and I don't even know what they thought about it, or they say something like, I'm going to go to school tomorrow. And it doesn't seem like they picked up the relevance and followed it out. Now, for Lang, that is the most disconfirming kind of experience, the tangential response. And just so structurally, I think Facebook is ripe with tangential responses. And my guess is, in that very simple sense, it's not a very confirming medium of communication. If anything, it probably leaves people feeling more and more disconfirmed all the time just by the very structure of the medium. Now, why do they go back though? Okay, so that I think is a larger issue. The most relevant work that I can think of there is a real must read is Morris Berman's book called Coming to Our Senses. And the key chapter in there is this opening chapter. It's just a brilliant, brilliant book. But this brilliant intro is called The Basic Fault. Now, what Berman's going to do is say that the emergence of the self coincides with the recognition of the other, and it happens by way of a fault line or a schism, a kind of break in what he, I guess, coming off of Goldstein, calls cosmic anonymity, or a connectedness with the world. It's like the other introduces an interruption or a break that then leaves me, I guess, out of my body in some way. That is, I come to think of myself as above and beyond, or as an addition to my body. So I say stuff like, I have a headache, or what am I going to do with my body because it is tired. I mean, we talk about, maybe we'll say I'm tired. I'll say, well, my body's really pooped out, or something like this. We introduce some sort of division there. Now, the issue of the division is that it is a self-other problem where I, in recognizing the other, circle back and realize that I am an other for others. And the sense in which I'm an other for others starts to become the major, I guess, obstacle or challenge in people's lives, which what Berman calls confiscation. Now, confiscation is what happens as that schism occurs, the individual loses their grounding in the somatic kinesthetic experience, the kind of direct sensory pleasures that come from being a body, and touch. See, touch is absolutely crucial here. Touch is one of the main realms of the kinesthetic and the somatic. See, it's very important to note, just as an example, that there has been a radical loss of touch, and I mean regular, steady physical contact in modern Western and particularly American cultures. People don't really touch each other that much, and I mean they're not in physical contact. Throughout history, people were not only were bodies more closely in contact with one another, but having your own room is it's a historical anomaly. And now today we raise children in their own room. They're really left out of lots of physical contact. I think this is for Berman one of the major problems. Is they become more and more removed from the somatic and kinesthetic. And I mean, even that you can illustrate it. When you talk about the nonverbal, many people, when they say the nonverbal, they mean the visual. Whereas no, the nonverbal, I mean, it sometimes means the visual, but it means the somatic, the kinesthetic, the haptic, the way that physical manipulation and touch and contact are the way that we gain identity and confirmation. I mean, if you don't realize this dimension, try to think of your dog. You could say nice things to your dog all day long and you can go, oh, you're a good dog. After a while, you have to pet the dog. The dog doesn't understand your affection without some genuine physical contact and some petting. I don't know why we don't see ourselves the same way. I think we need physical contact. I think physical contact has been eroding. This is part of Berman's point, and it's leading to a kind of confiscation. Well, what happens is, as touch becomes more and more diminished, people, they, in recognizing themselves as an other for others, they identify with what he calls the body image. And the body image isn't the body as it's lived, as it's felt, as it's somatically and kinesthetically operated, sort of, the way you are a body. Instead, I start to try to, what he calls, heal the basic fault by identifying with the body image. And so my basic strategy then, or people's basic strategy, is once they have been confiscated and they have what he calls the Nemo, right, the kind of emptiness inside, they now try to cover that over or refill the gap or mend the wound by simply believing that they are as they're seen. And the reality of myself as an other for others and the way it can be, I guess, looked at, looked upon, that becomes a kind of a consumption. It's somewhat Hegelian, I guess, and you see Hegel lurking in the backdrop here. But there is this sort of, slave-master dialectic, right? Where the person tries to get control of the view that others have of them, and they hope that that's going to regain the kind of deep felt identity that was lost, in the drift away from the somatic and the kinesthetic. Unfortunately, I guess we could all guess, it doesn't work. If it works at all, it works in bits and pieces, and it's never really complete. And so more and more people in our everyday world are losing the sense of what it means to be a body, and they're living in a world of what they imagine others see of them, and they're very interested in consuming information about how they think they're seen. So they love to see photos in Facebook of their friends, of them being with their friends, of comments on that. And so I think what's happening is people are more and more estranged, more isolated. They're yearning for a kind of community, but they're not going about it in the right way. The community that they're ending up finding is more focused on their own body image, that is, the sense of self that they think others see of them, right? They're trying to control or manipulate how they are the other for others. And, there's wonderful work on this in the anthropologist Edmund Carpenter, who Michael Michael Wesch, if people know who that is. Wesch was a student of Carpenter's, and Carpenter, he is still alive. At least he was last I knew. I saw him a year ago or so. Does fascinating work on cameras and what the photograph as just a technology, how it changed the way that we look at ourselves, how the way changed the way we understand fashion, the way that we understand uh, pose and expression and posture, all these kinds of things. It's hard to, I guess, say here in a really quick video the concerns about Facebook, but I guess I'll try to just round up this discussion off and say that, yeah, I think that people are using these new media technologies, oftentimes where they have to use their fingers and use gadgets and stuff. I think they're trying to recover some kind of sense of touch. I also think that many people, they have pets or children just because those are the few times when you can still come in contact and it's not kind of odd. I've even noticed it at the grocery store. There are people who, they want that divider between your stuff and their stuff. They don't even want your stuff to touch your stuff. That sense is very odd. But so there's a kind of general wholesale loss of physical contact in the culture, and Berman would say, "How comfortable are you when silence occurs?" Not does it occur, but when it occurs, how comfortable are you? If you're comfortable, his sense is you're somatically grounded. You're grounded in your body. People who are utterly uncomfortable with silence, especially among loved ones, family, friends, they're confiscated to such a degree that they believe that unless they're talking, they're not really in contact. Right? That's some sense of the bodily image, right? Of how we've been broken away from ourselves and now are trying to deal with what it means to be a person in terms of ideas, beliefs, of how those ideas and beliefs reflect upon us and how we will be seen having them or being known to be affiliated with them. Right? Again, it becomes a kind of fashion. So I think there is a real concern over the somatic and the kinesthetic, the haptic, of people are going to need to recover that. And there is a kind of community that comes from touch and solidarity of bodies that will never be able to be recovered by simply looking at or sharing ideas and that sort of stuff. Not to say that there isn't value in sharing ideas and beliefs in sort of YouTube, on Facebook, MySpace, these kinds of things. I think they can provide some forms of community. But the question is, what are people doing when they're on there? Are they trying to feel a common connection with people, or are they looking for some evidence of what they think other people think about them? It's as if people are becoming more and more strangers to themselves, and they spend time trying to find out who they are by way of what other people say about them and how other people are responding to them. But notice all of that is the way that we're others for others. It's not the kinesthetic or somatic self. So those would be some thoughts. I do think it is unfortunate that in our dream of success world, where oftentimes to go pursue that job means to leave your friends and family behind, and to go become a corporate executive often means long, hard hours. And there's been a great dissolution of deep, rich community, of everyday contact and rhythms of people who are deeply in our lives that we could reach out and touch and actually come into intimate contact with, right? You hold a hand, you put an arm around a shoulder. I guess that is declining, and people, I would hope that they can see that they're not necessarily getting happier with these communities, but I would also, I think we need to understand that this myth of success is creating the conditions where this poor substitute, this sort of weak substitute, and maybe even an alienated substitute, is better perhaps than no community at all. That's the concern. Okay, thanks.